So for my topic, I chose um children's learning during the preschool years. I chose this topic because I personally think that how preschool children learn during the stage is really interesting personally, and it's just incredible the amount of growth during these 2 to 3 years that someone can just grow that much. During this time, the brain develops even further, and this is a time in a person's life where they truly start to understand adults, and we can communicate a lot better rather than just crying, and sometimes when they raise their hand like they want to be held, they can physically talk and you can understand them. Um and then from a biological perspective, once a person hits their preschool years, they still grow quickly like they have been, but they don't grow as fast as they have been since the birth stage. During the preschool years, an average child grows about 2.5 inches in height and gains about 3 to 7 pounds each year. During this time, girls are only slightly smaller than boys, so they're roughly the same size, and in weight, they're about the same. Girls do have more fatty tissue than boys, and boys tend to have a little bit more um, muscle, I guess. You can say it's not like muscle, but they have less fat than girls. Both girls and boys slim down as their trunk of the body lengthens, and during this time, the head is usually somewhat large for the body, but by the time they get out of their preschool years and enter kindergarten, um, they have lost this. Body fat also shows a slower decline during these years. Preschoolers start to develop the ability to perform different activities, such as building towers with blocks or scribbling. They also have start to understand the concept of cutting paper with scissors. They also start to enjoy hopping around, jumping, and running, and just by doing those simple things, this brings them just a sense of accomplishment and pride that they're like, oh my goodness, like I can run. Like it's such a big deal in their life, which is really exciting to see a preschool kid get that excited over running. And then by the end of their preschool years, they tend to be more adventurous, and they now learn to come down the stairs with 1 foot rather than 2 feet. Like by this time they can go up the stairs with 1 foot, but they can't go down the stairs with 1 foot. So they're getting that concept down during their preschool years, and by the end of their preschool years, most children will have this accomplished. At the beginning of their preschool years, individuals are able to pick up the tiniest objects with their forefinger, their pointer finger, and their thumb. They can also build towers, even though they might not be in a completely straight line, but they can build pretty big towers. They're also interested in jigsaw puzzles, and with jigsaw puzzles, they understand the concept oh, there's a missing piece, and a piece needs to go there, but they usually can't get the pieces correctly, so they sit there and they try to move move it around until it fits, but it usually doesn't fit. And so you usually tell them oh, try another piece. And so they understand that concept though. And then by the time the child is 4, they become more precise about things. And then by the end of, depending on where they exactly lie with their birthday and stuff, but by the time they are 5, they want to start building houses and more bigger and complex things, but they still need help of an adult. Um, a diet and their habits of around nutrition and exercise, they're highly influenced by their caregiver, which nowadays it's not just the parents. Parents or guardians play a huge role in this caregiver, but a lot of the children, they're at daycare majority of the time during the day, and so just that caregiver during the daytime can highly influence them as well. Children should be engaging in physical activity every day, specifically for 15 or more minutes of physical activity per hour, or 3 hours per day total. Piaget's second stage is the pre-operational stage. This is the stage that preschoolers are in. In this stage, the child becomes to represent the world with words, images, and drawings. They become to form stable concepts and begin to reason. And at the same time, they still have those magical beliefs that there's like an imaginary friend, like their best friend doesn't necessarily exist. Um, and then Vygotsky's theory emphasizes the social context of learning and the construction of knowledge through social interaction. And in this theory, cognitive development depends on the tools that are provided by society, and their minds are shaped by the cultural context in which they live. Both of these theories see that developmental process and the relation between the individual and the society. Both of them also regard the roles of the individual and the environment are inseparable. The memory of a preschooler increases. The memory span increases to about 2 digits in 2 and 3-year-olds to about 5 digits in 7-year-olds. And then as the child gets older, their memory increases and becomes more accurate. Preschoolers can actually remember a great deal of information if they are given the appropriate cues and prompts. This is also why a child can testify at court. And then around ages 4 and 5, late preschool years, they hear other people use psychological traits and emotional terms, and they start to begin to include these in their self-descriptions. And they also start describing themselves as that as well. And then between ages 2 and 4, they start to learn how to reflect and feel these emotions. During the preschool years, they learn how to show affection for familiar playmates and can take turns in games. And they also start to understand the concept of like, oh, that piece of clothing is hers, or that piece of clothing's mine. That concept of the mine and his and hers concepts. This information can assist me with moving forward in my career and my life in general. I personally want to work with pediatrics, and I know pediatrics is from birth to age 18, but I feel like during the preschool years, it's just a lot happens during this time, and a lot of dramatical changes happen that you can really physically see. You can really start to interact with them. I'm not saying you can't interact with babies, but you can, they can start to build things, and you can do more than just sit there and cry, and that more interaction that way, you can kind of understand like their thought processes a little better, and um, so if I understand this specific age group where a lot of that connection happens, I can make a more personal connection with my clients. And so just understanding them on a deeper level can really be beneficial for me. And then for my example, throughout my paper, I used a little 4-year-old boy named Johnny. He tends to be a little smaller than all of his preschool classmates, and I just kind of go through my paper, and from a for an example, I just say during the preschool years, Johnny develops the ability to perform different activities, such as building towers with blocks, falling down and getting right back up, running as fast as he could, scribbling and cutting paper with scissors. And so I just really use how Johnny is this 4-year-old boy, and how he was maybe last year as a 3-year-old boy, and then how he is currently, and then how he might be next year of just the different biological and cognitive development. And yeah, so that's my paper.